Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. My name is Jake Burdett, here with my co-host, Hiruy Hadgu. How you doing today, Hiruy?
Hey Jake, how's it going?
Going well, going well. Thanks for coming back for episode number 2. I hope people enjoyed episode number 1 about a month ago. I'm sorry we're taking a little bit of time to get episode 2 out, but we've been busy getting everything else set up with the new group. But today, what we want to talk about is on our first introduction episode with our leader, Nicole Dvorak. We just touched on what is the purpose of this group, what is some of the things that we want to cover, and it's in the name, Progressive Democrats of Howard County. We want to cover progressive issues, but specifically, one of the biggest issues in Howard County seems to be issues of development and zoning and land use, and that's because the development industry is like the main moneyed interest group donating to our politicians, so they influence a lot of decisions that are being made. So, in pursuit of the effort of trying to cover these topics more, inform the public on what's going on with these seemingly complicated issues, but that really affect your day-to-day quality of life. We decided to form a zoning and land use committee that Hiruy here is the leader of. So we wanted to share some of the activities that the zoning and land use committee has been up to. So before we, I guess, get into that, Hiruy, why do you think zoning and land use issues are important and are, something that the average community member should want to learn more about?
So, that was a very good introduction, Jake. And you're right. So zoning and land use is a little covered issue in the county, and it's also primarily it's because it's not understood very well. It's the laws are arcane, and so it's very easy to pass things that are that people would easily overlook, and on top of that, people are busy. They're taking care of their families, and so they don't have time to be following up on every single bill that the county council and the county executive introduce and pass. So because of that, it's prone to misappropriation. It's prone to corruption, and so as a result, it's one of the main reasons local jurisdictions continue to have terrible quality of life. A lot of jurisdictions have that's one of the reasons. And our quality of life, on our day-to-day quality of life is tied to zoning and land use decisions made by the county council and approved by the county executive, and it boils down to infrastructure. It boils down to the money, the budget, which is impacted by those land use and zoning decisions, and so we need to be paying attention to that, and we need to make sure that we have accountability, and in Howard County, this is the politics of it. In Howard County, the majority of these decisions have been made by leaders of the Democratic Party, the local Democratic Party, and one benefit to and they have been getting away with terrible land use decisions by labeling these decisions as progressive and people trusting that. And so we need to, the rank and file, the voter needs to be out there saying, no, this is not progressive, this is progressive, and this is the vision that we want. And that's, I think, our role here. And so too often these things are these issues are conflated with fallacious arguments in terms of, are we talking about more housing or less housing, affordable housing? And that's not, those arguments are being made by people who are not interested in providing more housing for people who need them. And they're not made by people who care about providing quality schools for people who need them. And so this is, this is why we need to bring focus to these issues so the voter can understand, the listener of this podcast can understand. And so that's why we have our group, and we have our subgroup, the zoning and land use committee. So hopefully we'll bring more awareness to these issues. Jake.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Obviously, you know a lot more about this stuff than I do, but I know enough at least to know, this is important because even though these are private developers, a lot of times like millions of dollars of taxpayer money goes to these private developers in the forms of subsidies. So if people are asking, hey, why are we in like the third richest county in the country, but we can't afford to like build schools that aren't at 140% capacity? It's because all of your tax money is being siphoned off to these pay-to-play developer deals because the developers donated to the people, the politicians, allocating where the budget goes. So yeah, super important. I'm glad that
you were in one of those schools, weren't you?
Yeah, I went to Howard High School. I graduated in 2016, and I knew at the time that it was like a super crowded school, but at the same time, that was the only public school that I'd went to. So to me, it was kind of normalized at the time, and I didn't realize how absurd it was. But I saw at my elementary school, Rockburn Elementary, and then I went to Elkridge Landing Middle School. I did start to see the beginning of the concept of these portable classrooms being put up outside. But it was just kind of, the snowball was just starting to roll. And then I, go to college for 4 years, and I graduated in 2020, and I came back and got involved with the Matthew Moliette Board of Education campaign. And from there, I started to learn more about overcrowding. And yeah, I learned Howard High had 140% capacity, and it was absolutely absurd. And I have a friend who I went to high school with who lives by Howard High School, and sometimes we'll walk to like 7-Eleven from his house, and we walk through Howard High School, like the grounds of it. And I was there like 2 weeks ago, and just the amount of portable classrooms that they have now is absurd. And it's like, why don't we just build actual schools so that it doesn't get to this point in the first place? And people were super mad about Howard County not doing in-person class, or even like some sort of limited in-person stuff during COVID. And it's like, these are the effects, these are the unforeseen consequences that overburdened infrastructure has, is when it's that overcrowded, you can't do that. So yeah, super important issue. And I believe we have a bill that we recently testified that has to do a little bit with school capacity. And that's really what we want to do here with this episode, is give a little bit of a sample of what the Zoning and Land Use Committee has been working on. We are a relatively new group, so we're just getting started, but we were able to submit testimony on 3 bills last week, and that was CB 50, CR 104, and CR 105. Do I have those correct, Hiruy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are going to briefly touch on each of them, try to break it down in layman's terms a little bit. Hiruy definitely knows more about some of them than I do, but I'm going to try to do my best to keep up. But the first one that we're going to talk about a little bit here is it was CB 50, County Bill 50, 2021. And it relates to, in case people aren't familiar, there is a project that Erickson Living, which is like a big retirement community developer, I think based in Catonsville. And they've donated quite a large sums of money to our county executive, to various different council members in Howard County, even I think $10,000 to the state Democratic Party. So they've definitely paid their dues when it comes to trying their best to get their projects approved. And they've been trying to build a retirement community in Western Howard County. What is it, like over 1,400 units, Hiruy?
Yeah, it's 1,200 units for individual residential units, and a little over 200 units for people who need more intensive care, for retirees or older adults who need more intensive care.
Yeah, and so yeah, over 1,400, different units proposed for that retirement community in Western Howard County, and they've actually been the developer's been trying to get this project approved for at least since 2018, if not sooner. And they had to, get it approved by, I guess, the county council and the various different, development related boards in the county. I think originally in 2018, when they came forward, I think the bill was CB 59. They basically had a 3-year deadline to get, in order to be able to build a community that large in rural Western Howard County. I guess they currently do not have the infrastructure, specifically like the water and sewage infrastructure, to be able to accommodate all those units. So for that project to even be possible, basically the county needs to spend millions of dollars to extend that infrastructure. I believe it's called a public service area expansion. So they had the developer in 2018, when they were trying to get that, they had 3 years to get that public service area expansion approved. And I think it was in like July 2018 is when the deadline started. So that is basically this month, right? July 2021. The 3-year deadline was coming. They were not able to get it approved in time, which would mean that they would not be able to move forward with the project. And so in an effort to avoid that, they tried to file for another 2-year extension, to have 2 more years to get this public service area expansion approved, which again would cost the county millions of dollars, but end up serving the profits of this private developer, which you might be thinking, well, I mean, we do need more senior housing in Howard County. We have a increasing retirement age population. That is true, but that doesn't mean that this community in rural Western Howard County that does not exactly provide accommodations like transportation for elderly folks who might need it, that does not mean that this is the most ideal location to put a retirement community. So, we testified against, we sent testimony against CB 50 to extend the public service area expansion by 2 years. Hiruy, did you want to touch on a little bit of, why this project, and specifically the public service area expansion, was not a good idea to extend or really even consider in the first place?
Yeah, so the land that where the project is slated, where the petitioner wants to build the retirement facility, was initially zoned for, I believe, 3 or 4 uh, I think it's less than 10 for less, less than 10 units. It's like 65-acre land, and it's and the plan was the existing zoning allowed for less than 10 units. So so now they want to go from 10 to over 1,400. So the mitigation needed to address the road the road capacity, the traffic congestion is not adequate. So right now the developer says that it will address the traffic congestion, but looking at the traffic studies, there are a lot of issues in terms of how the developer will get the land along Route 108 to expand. There might be they expect, even the county's technical staff report says they expect to encounter challenges in purchasing land from homeowners or property owners along Route 108 to expand the road. So if they're not successful, then that would mean here we have 1,400 units with hundreds of parking space that's planned in this property as well, and with the terrible traffic conditions. Who's going to pay to fix that is going to be the taxpayer, and it's going to be in the millions of dollars to fix that. The fiscal impact report showed that the county will end up paying more in expenses to deal with the cost of the facility over the timeline of the facility, over the life of the facility, than any revenues that it would gain. And the fiscal impact analysis provided by the developer, it was problematic. There are a lot of terrible assumptions that it made that were favorable for the developer but unfavorable for the taxpayer. And as you mentioned, it's all the way outside of the center of the county, where for example, if this retirement facility was in downtown Columbia, where it's more walkable, then the retirees would be better off. Of course, this is an expensive retirement facility. There's a lot of good things have been said about Erickson retirement facility, and I don't doubt that those things are true. But it costs a lot of money to live there, and retirees in Howard County, according to a survey that was conducted by the county, prefer to retire in their home, and so they would prefer that their existing home is retrofitted to allow them to be mobile and to have a better accessibility, and also they want better transportation. Those are the two priorities that they say they wanted. And so this goes against what retirees in Howard County, who most of them would not be able to afford this facility because they make significantly less than the median income, the county's median income. So a lot of issues. So at the end of the day, the question is, who does this project benefit? Does it add value to the residents? Does it add value to the county in terms of making sure that it's at least not adding costs? The answer is no. The taxpayer will be subsidizing this to the tune of millions of dollars, because the infrastructure needed to accommodate this is going to be significant. And the only reason that it's moving forward, despite all its problems right now, is because you have we have the county executive who's received campaign contributions. Many other politicians will receive campaign contributions, and then in the county council members Cristiano Rigby and Opal Jones, who seem to do what the county executive asked them to do on almost all zoning and land use decisions, and the council member David Youngman, the Republican council member, who seems to also do almost everything that the county executive asks him to do. So this, it's a terrible project. It's going to cost taxpayer dollars, and we'll talk about this a little bit more with the Erickson project, with other people, with other guests in the future as well. But as it is, the zoning board is hearing the case to approve the petition, and it would be better for the taxpayer if it's not approved.
Yeah, and I believe there's also, even debate about, because for them to rezone this land to be able to extend the public service infrastructure out there and to be able to build the community that way, I believe it requires a map amendment, which is supposed to also be approved by the county council instead of just the zoning board. So the process is up in the air as well. But you really touch on a good point there of, and a big reason why we made this committee in the first place is because there is a very intentional effort by the development lobby and sort of their foot soldiers to paint any and every development deal as progressive. And if you're against this, then you're not progressive. But that's why it's so important to note that David Youngman, the Trump Republican, the only Republican on our county council, is basically the swing vote on all of these deals, and has accepted money from Erickson himself. So for people to act like this is some big progressive thing when this is the guy who's one of the loudest cheerleaders in his district, to me that kind of blows a hole in that idea, and it's really sad to see people try to paint obvious pay to play corruption deals as progressive. But yeah, it seems like another development boondoggle happening to Howard County taxpayers. We will keep people in the loop on that project, and as Hiruy said, I think we are going to do another episode down the line, a little bit more in depth about that project and the problems with it. So yeah, we submitted testimony, not just Progressive Democrats of Howard County. We actually submitted a joint testimony with Indivisible Howard County, the economic equity team there. So unless there's anything else you wanted to say about CB50, we could probably go on to CR 104 and 105.
Yes, so CR 104 and 105 are they're sort of I describe them as more perfunctory resolutions that the county council passes every year because it's required by law to pass them. And 104 is it's called the housing unit allocation chart for 2022, for fiscal year 2022, and it's supposed to so every 10 years the county develops a general plan, So in 2010, there was a general plan. I believe that in 2010, there was a general plan 2030. And right now the county is working on general plan 2040, which is the HoCo by design, which is expected to be another huge giveaway to the tune of hundreds of millions to developers based on what's been discussed so far. But before, not to digress, but this chart is based on the housing projected in general plan 2030. It says every year the county expects to build X number of houses, and it's supposed to work with in tandem with the adequate public facilities ordinance that is the county's tool to mitigate impact of growth on public infrastructure. So so it would say, the county this year expects to build X number of homes, and there is something called a waiting list bin that says that holds residential projects that would in this bin if the school in the project area is over capacity, and the numbers for whether something is over capacity or not is determined by the adequate public facilities ordinance. And it says right now, I believe it says the elementary schools should not be 105% over capacity. High schools should not be 115% over capacity, and middle schools should not be, I believe it's either 105 or 110% over capacity. So given those are the numbers, so if one of those, if the school is over capacity, this project will be on hold, and it's in the waiting list bin. And every year, it was for 4 subsequent years, or for 3 subsequent years, it's tested again. And if the school is over capacity, it's on the waiting list. And on the 4th year, it moves forward whether the school is over capacity or not. So this has been what's going on for, I want to say, 2 decades in Howard County. And in fact, Jake, you mentioned Howard High was 140% over capacity, and one of the reasons was the high school test for capacity was not in the adequate public facilities ordinance, or APFO, until 2018, when a new law was passed. So before then, the high school did not need to be, it could be over capacity. There was no limit.
High schools were exempt from APFO.
They were exempt. Yeah, they were exempt from APFO. And so as a result of that, that's why you are in a school that was 140% over capacity, and it's there's there are a lot of tangible and intangible adverse consequences because of that. And of course, the tangible is when schools are overcrowded, the classrooms are overcrowded, the class sizes go up, and it impacts the school budget every year, and so that leads to class sizes going up. And ultimately, though, the long-term impact is it hurts it hurts the quality of the school, that leads to um, uh, and the primary victims, I would say, of poor quality schools are children from lower socioeconomic from I would say from the lower socioeconomic strata. So when they will not get the right level of attention in schools because class sizes go up. So I just just to touch on when people who are concerned about schools and when who talk about school overcrowding related to development, the corporate Democrats would say, well, you're opposed to housing, you're opposed to providing housing for people who want it and who need it. And this is where I think we need to push back and say, you can build 1 million houses. Nobody, I don't care personally whether you build 1 million houses, 1 billion houses. The point is, when you build the houses, there needs to be the public infrastructure to be able to provide a quality level of service to people who live there. And so that's our testimony for CR 104 related to housing allocation chart is to reiterate the need to make sure that to make certain recommendations that would address how these allocations are made and and requiring that when schools are overcrowded, right now, like I said, the project is put on a waiting list bin for 4 years, and council members Liz Walsh and Deb Young had voted for there was a bill that was introduced by council member Liz Walsh in 2019, it's CB 17 2019, that would have increased the waiting time from 4 years to 7 years. And council members Liz Walsh and Deb Young voted for it, but it failed because council members Opal Jones, Christiana Rigby, and David Youngman voted against it, and that was thereby helping the developer and hurting the taxpayer and the students and the children who go to these schools.
Yeah, and you touch on a really important point about canceling that straw man argument that the developer defenders try to use. If they try to frame, if you're against a development project, oh, I guess you're against housing, you don't want more people in your community, you don't want poor people or people of color in your community, you're a NIMBY, every name under the sun. But the reason why that's so disingenuous is because exactly what you said, we don't have, or at least on the left who are critical of developers, we don't have an issue with housing being built in our community. We have an issue with housing not being built at pace with the infrastructure, which is actually a super, super, super easy issue to solve. You just have to build schools on a more frequent basis, which also requires proactively ahead of time picking out land that can accommodate schools in the future using things like land trust and just, long range community planning. But the problem is it's developers who have been calling the shots. It's the developers who are donating to the politicians, and therefore building developing infrastructure, at a level pace with each other is not the priority. Their priority is what's going to make us the most money. I guess it seems to be housing. So they don't care about building schools. They don't care about building roads, aside from, if it services them to, get more money. So yeah, that's what we need to do, is just put a pause on the housing stuff until we give the rest of the infrastructure that's been neglected for so long time to be built. And it's also disingenuous that they try to frame their argument as the progressive one because they're building more housing. But when you think about it, is that really good for the new residents of the community if they move in and then go to an overcrowded school that doesn't have time to like focus on their needs, that they don't have the infrastructure to accommodate having a good quality of life? Is that really for their best interest? Or do you think they want to come in Howard County and go to, you know, basically have what they expect when they move in? Because I'm sure they're not expecting to go to overcrowded schools and whatnot. Like they think that, you know, because they
Yeah.
hear really good things about the Howard County school system. So it's a super simple solution to solve this problem. And the other big point that you touched on is the deadlines of, you know, it was a 3 or 4 year waiting period, and then if that 3 or 4 year period goes by and it's still overcrowded, they're just still allowed to build. So it's almost like, what even is the point of these deadlines? They seem very arbitrary, and having it where they can just wait it out for a couple of years while they plan other development projects, they just have a bunch in the queue that eventually come around. They have no incentive to build the schools and other infrastructure because they say, hey, we can just wait it out, let the schools continue to be overcrowded,
Exactly.
and eventually build it. So, you know, you touch on a lot
Yeah.
of important points there on how to, you know, actually bring real solutions, and not their solution always coincidentally is build more, just build more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And in fact, you know, we, in our testimony, we proposed that, you know, first they need to extend the waiting time. But then the other thing is, you know, what concurrently with extending it, or even separately, to require that, you know, once the waiting time is over, to get out of the waiting list bin, the developer needs to pay an adverse economic impact fee that, you know, that says, again, you know, we're dealing with, you know, I think, you know, 90% of the county's issues deal with zoning and land use. So so if you know, the county's budget, which was passed recently, the impact on that budget, so all the impact did not happen, you know, like last month. The actions, the decisions that led to the budget did not happen last month or last year. They happened 4 or 5 years ago. So a decision that was made 4 or 5 years ago showed up in the budget this year. So it takes a while for this to show up. And so we need to make sure that we're accounting for the future impact correctly. And so, you know, if a developer wants to go ahead and build, fine, but then they need to pay for the adverse impact, economic impact fee, you know, after the waiting period is over. And so, yeah, I mean, this is not, again, it's not, you know, the there is a disingenuous argument being, you know, being framed, and that people who ask for infrastructure, you know, roads, water, sewer, schools, are, you know, they're that's being conflated with opposing residential development, and that's not true. And any developer who frames it that way is perhaps interested in relying on the taxpayer subsidies for their profit. That's probably why they're opposed to requiring the right level of infrastructure, because that means, you know, once they build, the taxpayer pays for the infrastructure demand after that. And by the way, the best and the most efficient way of reducing the cost of housing is by destroying the quality of the level of service of the county delivers, because all the people that are coming here for the schools, once they find out that the quality has deteriorated, the people with the means are going to go somewhere else, and the people who will be left holding the bag are people who can't afford to go anywhere, and so that ends up deteriorating the quality of life even more.
Yeah.
So there has to be a way to balance all these objectives properly.
Yeah, and that's super critical, because what the developers don't realize, or maybe they do realize and just don't care because they can always just go to some other city once there's nothing left here. But that is the reason that people move to Howard County, is the proximity to the job markets of DC and Baltimore. But the reason that they choose, not to live in Baltimore is because they want the great Howard County schools. So if we continue to neglect that and let that reputation slip us by, then suddenly people aren't going to want to live here anymore. And the whole reason that makes Howard County attractive in the first place, we've destroyed it because we prioritized what made us the most money. And
Yeah.
One last point I want to touch on with the deadline stuff is, that I meant to bring this up with the CB50, with the Erickson Living Retirement Project, but it's like if they're told, hey, this is the deadline, and then the deadline comes and you can just extend for a further then like, what's the point of the deadline? And it makes you wonder, even if this public service area expansion deadline does get extended by 2 years, if for whatever reason Erickson Living still can't get everything approved in 2 years, will they just come back for another deadline extension and just keep going and going and going and going? So I think that's pretty good for CR 104. I think we've been talking probably for about 45 minutes or so, maybe 50 minutes. So if you want to touch real briefly on CR 105, then we could probably wrap it up.
Yeah, I think there's probably not much more to talk about in terms of CR 105. It's related to the CR 104, the housing allocation. And this is just, again, another perfunctory thing where the county adopts the school capacity charts that are developed by the school system, and it lists the schools that are overcrowded and over capacity, or the county, the law has been changed to call anything that's over capacity as constrained now, so that doesn't, so it doesn't give the impression that the school is over capacity. So yeah, now they're constrained, or I would say just over capacity, and so we're reiterating our calls, for improving the methodology to determine student yield from different kinds of residential housing, single family attached, detached apartments, whether it's a resale or whether it's a new construction. All these things play a factor in how the student yields are determined. And for a very long time, new construction, the developer and the county administration has been saying that resales account for most of the impact on the schools. But it turns out, because of how the county defines what are resales and what is a new construction, they've been misallocating the impact from new construction. And so it turns out, we have been saying that new construction contributes significantly more than resale. And it turns out that it is true that new construction provides significantly more. And so that needs to be accounted better in how the student yields are calculated, and addressing the school surcharge fees, even more, because I've been talking about school surcharge fees for a while. It was raised recently in 2019, but I think it should be more because it's been very low for a long time. And so the way that the county does calculates the fiscal impact on these issues, that needs to be addressed as well. So we called on addressing the methodology and how they determine the student yields, and how they also how they calculate the fiscal impact on the school system.
Yeah, and thank you for the breakdowns on those two resolutions. But yeah, that's the tricks that the developers and their defenders do, is they fudge the numbers, they mix terminologies, they do whatever sneaky little tricks they need to do to make sure that the narrative is always build more, even if that's what caused the problems in the first place. The solution, trust us, the solution is build more, and they will do science for hire fake studies like you talked about in the past, which is really no different than Exxon funding their own study that, oh, look at that, shows climate change isn't our fault. So you got to take everything that these people say with a grain of salt, because you have to realize that they have literally an economic incentive to pull the wool over your eyes and trick you. And I think that's the worst part of this all is, I would be okay with the developments that if they were simply willing to pay their fair share. If they're willing to, these are private projects that they want to make a private profit off of. I mean, that is how our economic system works, but then make the investments yourself. But they seem to want to just do these public-private partnerships where it's the taxpayers footing the bill, the taxpayers taking the risk, and then they reap all the profit. And then it's the residents that have to deal with the consequences. So, and then I guess one last point is
just let me to add to that, Jake. I agree. It would be nice if the developer was a steward of its community, and they're not going to be. Unfortunately, they're going to build and they're going to leave, and we're going to be left holding the bag. But at least our politicians need to be representing us instead of the developer interests. And so far we have council members Deb Young and Liz Walsh who are doing who are fighting an uphill battle, and they've been successful in some cases, but they are they're facing a lot of opposition from council members Opal Jones, Christiana Rigby, and David Youngman, a bipartisan group of council members who are doing everything that the county executive Calvin Ball has been asking them to do. And so it would be nice if these four represented our interests instead of the corporate, instead of continuing to provide corporate welfare using our taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and I recommend Hiruy just came out with a great another one, as DJ Khaled would say, of a blog, very informative, breaking down what the developers are up to and who on the county council and the county executive are facilitating these pay-to-play deals. And he has a really good breakdown of who specifically Howard Hughes Corporation, the biggest developer in Columbia, how much they've donated to each of the council members, and also to the Howard County Republican Central Committee, which I believe has taken like $40,000, which it's weird that the local conservatives like to rail against the developers, and I really hope that they are consistent with that and hold David Youngman to that same standard that they rightfully hold people like Calvin Ball to. So yeah, everybody check out that blog. And then the last point I wanted to make is, because I forgot to make it originally with CB50, but Hiruy touched on the general plan for 2040 with HoCo by design. that's another reason why this PSA expansion into rural Western Howard County, is, just in general, not a good idea, but especially not at this time because they haven't really accounted for that. And it questions, is this going to set a precedent for continued development? The developer might say, well, now we have the infrastructure there, so let's develop other things too and throw off the general plan. So that's about all I had. Is there any last thoughts, comments you wanted to? No.
Nope. This was, I think, hopefully, people just, we need to be paying a lot more attention to what's going on, because the county leaders and the establishment, they're contemplating a very generous corporate welfare with HoCo by design, and so we need to pay attention and testify, show up to these meetings, and so yeah. Thanks for the summary of CB 50, Jake.
Yeah, well, thank you for leading this effort with the zoning and land use stuff with Progressive Dems of Howard County. Super important, as we said, and I'm starting to learn that more and more every day, it seems. So closing thoughts for me. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, Progressive Democrats of Howard County. Follow us on Twitter at Progress HoCo. Go to our website, HoCoProgressives.com, and also want to advertise. We are trying to really highlight progressive candidates in Howard County, but also in Maryland, who are not bought off by corporate money, whether that be developers, healthcare interests, military industrial complex, you name it. And one of those candidates is Greenbelt Mayor Colin Byrd, youngest Black mayor in the country at 28 years old, and super firebrand AOC style progressive, and he's challenging Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen for U.S. Senate here. And we actually have a meet and greet event Saturday, July 24th at 3:30 p.m. At one of our members' houses in Columbia. If you want, if you have any interest in meeting him and getting involved with our club, and you'd like the address for that event, you could email us at progressivedemsofhoco@gmail.com, and we will send you that address. Hope you can make it. Other than that, appreciate the support, everybody. Take care. It's Jake, Burdett, and Hadgu signing out. Bye.